Good morning. So AI is the theme of the day. What I like about this panel coming up is that we're going to broaden that to cybersecurity, which is also a hot topic for the last few years. And we don't often talk about them together because cybersecurity has been quite manual in many ways. It's a lot of it is pattern-based, and a lot of it's kind of looking in the rearview mirror. But when we talk about AI in cybersecurity, there's so many things that AI can bring to the table, which is why we've got two great guests who are going to talk to us about this. The first question I want to ask from each of the guests is kind of delve into your own areas in your own companies and ask the question, what is the weakness that you have now in the way you approach cybersecurity? What are problems and flaws in your approach to cybersecurity right now? I'll start with you, Binru.
Thank you. It's tricky to ask about weaknesses in the first question. Well, I think yesterday night, I don't know how many audience was at this Bloomberg event yesterday night, right? Cybersecurity risk, safety concerns was top #1 that comes out. I'm a tech person. In my view, if you are afraid of it, then you probably get cheated because you know lesser of it. So I think education is probably, and awareness will probably be the first thing to conquer, right? So as customers ask more questions about how we protect the data, how you use the new tech, the curiosity is important, and the ability to explain how the tech comes about and how it works, I think is important, so that you're not entering to a black box. So I would think the first one is awareness, because a lot of customers hears and reads about what AI can do, so they dream that this is possibly, I think expectations at the consumer level is a little too high right now compared to what the tech can deliver.
Right.
So I don't know, this imagination plays a very big part. We're all excited about the new tech. Right, so
but the human angle is the real weakness in most organizations, isn't it? Humans making mistakes or opening up backdoors inadvertently. That's really a big issue. I want to then ask you, Karthik, at Mastercard, obviously, this is a company that basically makes money or loses money from its ability to detect fraud or stop fraud. How do you see the weaknesses in Mastercard right now, given there are so many different attack vectors, so many different ways to try and hack into the financial system, and your job is to try and stop that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just telling somebody the other day, 3 years ago when I started this role, it was tough to walk into meetings if you talked about cybersecurity. It was one of the boring topics. Today, if I say that I want to talk about cyber, I can literally walk into any bank and have a meaningful discussion on what they're doing. There's just a profile change in how important cybersecurity has become. Coming specifically to your question on where do we see the weaknesses of cybersecurity, I think today when we look at payment security, it's almost become a question of cybersecurity. All the attacks that we see are by sophisticated criminals who operate big enterprises, sophisticated enough to actually be able to take down banking networks. So it's very sophisticated in terms of the scale of attacks that they do, right? So that's the starting point of where this entire cybersecurity, payment security journey is progressing. In terms of where we see weaknesses, it comes down to, of course, human errors. Obviously, the ecosystem, as we look at it, is composed of markets with various levels of maturity in cybersecurity. Right. So that obviously plays a big role in some markets being well ahead in terms of their maturity to manage cybersecurity, and some markets either not having the knowledge or the people or the ability to invest to stay at the top on cybersecurity. The second big trend that I see is the number of people in the ecosystem. Previously, it used to be banks, a cardholder, merchant, and us. Today, banks, by definition, work with so many different vendors. Everybody in the ecosystem has multiple parties that they need to work with. And obviously, the chain is as weak as the weakest link. And therefore, you need to make sure that every one of these people who are involved in some part of the payment ecosystem are fully equipped to manage cybersecurity.
Right, because there's so many players involved that there's so many chances for there to be a weakness.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
So we do have prepared a poll, so we'll bring up the poll if we can. People have a chance to put their answer forward. which type of hack do you most worry about? I'm curious to know what people think about that. So go ahead and give us your answers, and we'll see if we can come up with the results shortly. I want to also, I mean, talking to both of you, I want to ask the question about this trade-off between speed, accuracy, security. Now, I know the guaranteed way to make sure that you don't get hacked or you don't have any cybersecurity issues, and that's just don't transact, right? But both of you are in the business of trying to allow your customers, whether on the consumer side or the business side, to transact as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. That tends to conflict with security issues. How do you deal with that, Karthik, about kind of balancing security and speed, which everybody wants both of?
Ideally, we don't want to ever trade off between those two. I think convenience is probably going to be the main factor where customers decide which mode of payment they use. Whether they decide to use a Mastercard and tap at the terminal, or they decide to use cash, is going to be at many points of time dependent on how long does it take for the transaction to go through. Because the underlying reason for them doing that is not to pay, but to do an activity, buying or going into a movie hall, for example. So we are very aware of the fact that we don't need the convenience to be sacrificed. In fact, many of the tools that we have as a company in terms of safety and security are probably not visible to customers. As a company, we process roughly anywhere between 2,500 to 10,000 transactions a second. But huge. We do score every one of these transactions in real time and give an insight score to our issuers to make a meaningful decision on whether it's likely to be a fraudulent transaction or a good transaction. And that's something that most customers would never see, but it's absolutely fundamental to how we operate and how the issuers operate in being able to decision on transactions.
And that's a key point, though, isn't it? That you don't want customers to see your security.
They don't need to.
If they see it, then you've kind of lost the game.
They don't need to, but they need to feel it.
Right.
So, for example, in e-commerce transactions, the use of one-time passwords or a biometric is fairly prevalent. And that's, in many ways, helped customers get comfortable with doing e-commerce transactions. Of course, that was 7, 8, 9 years ago. We are moving to a more quieter, behind-the-scenes authentication process in the coming years. But it took that time for the maturity to set in the market where customers felt comfortable doing e-commerce transactions because they were being asked a question, did you make this transaction? Can you input this particular code into the transaction? And that was a visible way by which they got security. But in many other cases, it's not really required.
Right.
It just goes in the backdrop.
Now, Binra, I know at OneConnect, you are implementing facial recognition in some areas, right? Tell us about, first of all, why? Why do it? I mean, it's a hip thing to implement facial recognition for everything. It's even on iPhones and other things. What was the fundamental reason why you felt that was a good solution to security? And has it really sped things up? Has it really made things more secure? It also presents the other problem of data security, people's faces. People just feel a bit kind of eked out by the idea of facial recognition being deployed.
So facial recognition is one of the many products that we have. But to your answer on speed and accuracy, I would reply, if you may allow me to, from a Chinese company's perspective.
Yeah.
I've been in an American firm all my life, and then Ping An is the first Chinese company. I would say definitely speed first on top of accuracy. The pace of innovation in China is so fast, but you have to take a lot of education with the customer what they're signing up for, right? But the pace to innovation is so fast that if you take a long time to try, then you never know what exactly, because the algorithm, the way that that when it's deployed on a smaller scale, you get a lot of feedbacks, like even facial recognition. When we first rolled out, then people test with a picture, and they realize that they can, you can detect liveliness, then they start with a video. Now we have to add in a 3D sensor that allows you to sense that it's a 3D figure, etc. So things need to be tested and deployed in order for the tech to mature. So you put in a lot of precautions. You monitor very hard when you deploy on a small scale. But the speed to deploy is very, very key.
But if you work too fast and move too fast, either at the transaction level or the deployment level, aren't you opening yourself up to flaws in your systems that people can exploit? Is that not a concern? Or is it a trade-off between, yes, it could cost us money, but being too slow will cost us money too. How do you make that decision?
Being too slow will probably cost you more money. The customer has to be excited about trying a new tech. And not every country is the same, but then the emerging Asia, I think if I was just telling Karthik earlier that if the customer knows that I have not deployed this tech in the country at all, some of them are actually excited. Yeah, I would like to be the first one.
Right, okay.
And in Singapore, it's maybe the opposite. Have you deployed this somewhere else before? If you haven't,
Right.
I'm not keen to be the first one. Yeah.
So the risk then is, in terms of moving slow, is that they're going to go to your competitor, they're going to go elsewhere,
Yes.
and you've lost them forever? Is that really what it comes
Yes,
down
yes.
to? So being first to market is more important even than security?
No, security is important, so you will pilot it on a smaller scale. We build dashboards that's very robust, so you want to know the very moment something goes wrong, you want to be able to fix it. So usually the pilot run is a lot of resources put in, a very close active monitoring, and you scale slower, right? But then you will want to deploy fast in order to learn.
So it's that iteration process that's very important, right?
Yes.
So we asked the first question in the poll. Do we have the results? Can we bring up the results of that first poll? I'm curious to know what people think. There we go. All right.
Credit card. There you
Wow, that's overwhelming. I didn't expect it would be so overwhelming, but that's an interesting result. We do have another poll coming up later, which I'll ask later. But one thing that it comes to the same point. You're both in fintech, but fintech and finance is so many areas. Obviously, Karthik, you're in a specific kind of sliver of the industry. But from what you're seeing, and if we stick to specifically Asia, are there certain subsectors that are deploying AI? Let's talk about AI specifically, faster or better, and others that maybe are working a bit too slowly for your liking. You can talk, of course, about the credit card payments industry, but if you want to have a stab at someone else or get angry about another sector of the industry, welcome.
No, so we actually started our journey with AI probably around 7-8 years ago, because we had to essentially score these transactions in real time and have the ability to keep pace with the rate of change of fraudulent vectors emerging on a single everyday basis. We had to move to an AI ML platform which could just learn on the fly and not wait for a new model to get developed. So that was the journey which we took around 8 years ago. And as we started working with a company that was helping us do this transition, we actually acquired them 2 years ago. Now, interesting part of the journey, of course, is now we have the capability in-house. We use it for all our different products. But then we also said, why can't we actually offer this technology to our partners? And we've been having discussions with a lot of different banks, a lot of merchants across Asia. And what is interesting is almost every one of them has at least come very close to trying out AI. So it's almost like nobody's not thought about doing AI. They want to. Some of the better ones have actually done projects in the last 2-3 years and implemented in specific areas. One area that seems to resonate very well with the banks that I've talked to is in the area of operations and call center efficiency, et cetera. So that part, I think, has a fairly evolved piece around it. We work with them very closely on payment security, and that's one area where either they want to use existing technology and then use AI, which is outsourced, essentially the scores that we provide. In some cases, they want to merge the two and get the best results. So they want to use an AI engine which runs within their own bank ecosystem that runs data. And then they look at our information, which provides the information connect from the fact that we see transactions across 200 different countries. So they use both those pieces, both using AI, and combine it together to get the best results.
I want to talk to you more about how you're deploying AI or rolling it out. You acquired a company a couple of years ago, so clearly it was an area that you felt was important. Is it making things faster? I mean, because in transaction security, as I understand it, quite often the horse has already bolted before you've even known it's left the gate. This has been a big problem for years.
Yep.
How can AI close that gap between a breach or a pattern of breaches or frauds and you detecting it and being able to stop it? Talk to me about how AI can be implemented in that area.
Sure. If I could do a poll, I'd probably ask people, how high would you rate the embarrassment of a transaction getting declined? When you're sitting in a restaurant and you give the card and the card gets declined, I would guess it's probably in the top 5-6 things in terms of embarrassment.
Yeah.
So part of what we also try and do is when we do these fraud monitoring and making sure that things don't work properly, we have to make sure that the good transactions don't get declined, right? And typically, when we started working with these models, one of the first things that we did was we created, let me explain it this way. If you look at a pond with a flat surface, you'll see small ripples, and those are, let's say, the potential case of fraud elsewhere. So if you have the ability to look at every possible combination, okay, Bank A of, let's say, Singapore, their customers using ATM machines in country B between the hours of 6 in the evening to 10 in the evening. You have a certain number that you expect. Now, as long as you know that number and there is variation to that number within a tolerance band, things are fine. If suddenly the number spikes up 10x, you know there is a problem, and then you need to react very quickly to it, and it's impossible for a manual system to react to that, because you need to check whether the problem is with the ATM system in country B, is it a problem with the bank this side, or are they actually under attack both sides in terms of a targeted attack? And the good thing with AI is it takes calls based on where it sees the most amount of fraud. It's all based on risk scores. And then it says, okay, I made a call. I'm going to shut this thing down for 1 hour from the issuer side, from the bank side. Okay? And that could bring the fraud levels down, or it could actually pick up on the ATM side. It immediately shifts what it needs to do. And most importantly, we don't have to do anything. The system learns from the experience that it did.
So these are not set patterns. This is adaptive learning to patterns.
Yeah.
Right, interesting. So, Binra, I want to ask you then the same question about how you've seen AI deployed in the finance sector. Obviously, Ping An itself is an insurance company amongst everything else. Are you seeing really good deployments of AI? Are you also seeing like maybe frustration in other aspects of the finance industry where they're not adapting quickly enough?
I think with Mastercard, we're maybe addressing very different markets. So OneConnect, we take what's newest and latest from China. So our targeted audience are usually the countries with a lot of unbanked population. I mean, China is the largest emerging, right? And we focus a lot on actually, we're not too concerned about forced rejects, unlike developed markets, right, where you focus on customer service. So we are focusing on addressing a new population, going into a new business stream, and therefore, actually, maybe the cybersecurity part of it is more important than the forced rejects, since you were not previously addressing that revenue stream anyway. So other than facial recognition is an entry tool to all our solutions. But largely with Southeast Asia, our most popular solutions are maybe the unsecured lending platforms, right? So a lot of countries are trying to venture into unsecured lending. So the first step they need to do is just open an account, right? So that's where the biometrics comes in. But after you open an account, how to risk score unknown population, how to take alternative data points and be able to do the scoring. We have a technology that we deployed new in this emerging country, and we've done it largely in China, and it's called micro-expression analysis. Basically, you do a remote interview of someone that's far away that couldn't go to a branch for a loan interview, and then you analyze moods and signs of anxieties as he answers this question.
This is kind of like a real-time lie detector test?
A little bit of that,
wow,
yes. And then
freaky.
It gives you red flags. It's not hard evidence that you are not being honest. It just says that the candidate in answering these questions has more red flags on anxiety. So it gives the loan assessor, and a human being makes the decision whether I should still lend, right? Maybe I reduce the premium, maybe I reduce the tenure, but at least there is some data points.
But is it still a human making that end decision?
Yes.
Do you want to remove the human from that decision and make it purely data-based? Or do you plan on having a human making that final decision in the end? Because so many studies have shown that humans get too emotional in these decisions. Not deliberately, but they make false decisions for all sorts of reasons. What's your thinking about that?
Yes. Our tech, we have done research that says that our tech is probably more accurate than an average loan assessor. Of course, because not every loan assessor is going to be experienced enough, right? So an average one, our tech performs better. But a lot of banks, and most banks, if not all banks, still has a human behind. And the reason is because the micro-expression it's just one data point. So you have other data points that you need to consider, right? So your scorecard needs to be all-encompassing.
So the key point then in deployment is not to rely on one specific
not one
data stream.
Yes, yes.
So we have a second poll question coming up. So if we can bring that up. Which institution type do you least trust? So go on, tell us, be honest with us. This is anonymous. We won't hold it against you. There we go. All right. Oh, it's changing. So people are still polling. We'll come back to it in a moment. We'll continue the discussion. I'm curious to see what the final result will be. We talk about AI. I'm curious to know, just very, very quickly as we get towards the end of our chat, what can AI not solve, Karthik? In your domain, what can AI not do?
Well, I think so we've abstracted a lot of these questions from a transactions perspective into solving it. I think when it comes down to banks still making decisions on customer choices, customers in terms of where they want to lend more, etc. I think AI is going to be a tool that helps, but again, as you were saying, there's going to be a human element involved at some level for many of the larger decisions. To be honest, from a transaction security perspective, would I bet on a lot of these things being done by more by AI than by something else? I would almost bet yes. We're getting better at it every day. I struggle to pinpoint a particular place where an AI cannot solve a problem from a payment security perspective.
Right.
But it's probably a fairly narrow vision compared to the entire payment ecosystem. Right. So that's where I'll
So in your area, AI can be very strong and powerful.
I mean, we've seen the benefits of that over the last 5-6 years, and we keep moving it into every new tool that we develop, and also redoing all the tools that we had in the past, and it's been exceptionally good every single time. So I'm struggling to see a place where we tried it and it didn't work, and we said, oh, let's not put AI into it.
Right. How about you, Binru? I mean, human loan officers can have a certain weakness. That's another topic we can discuss later. Did anyone check Elon Musk and Jack Ma last week? Go back and have a look. Loan officers, it's a human element. There's a certain kind of flaw in it, but maybe it's okay to have these human flaws in the financial industry. What do you think about that? I mean, do we have to always be perfect? Do we have to have everything purely data-driven, or is there still room for humans in the process of the financial system?
I definitely think it's not there yet that it can take over a human. I mean, AI cannot address empathy, cannot make judgment calls. It can do a lot of things. It's increasingly getting more and more scenarios that AI can do. In our lab right now, of course, we're doing AI to compose music. We're using AI to be creative or innovative in one way or the other. But I still think that generally where a human touch, like a doctor's visit, no matter how automated it can be, is still a tool to the doctor. So where the human touch is needed, the machine cannot replace.
Right, right. Speaking of like emotions and empathy, you know, one of the topics that we're asking a lot today is the trade war, because that really is more of an emotional kind of battle between certain key leaders around the world. So I do want to ask you about that, because you're in very unique situations where you are. So I want to ask you, I mean, are you seeing an impact on the trade war in terms of how you're rolling out your business, how you're deploying, how you're dealing with China, which is, you know, where fundamentally OneConnect comes out of? Or is it no impact?
So first of all, we try to position OneConnect Singapore for Southeast Asia as very international. All our solutions are in English. 70% of our people are locals. You know, they're Southeast Asia talents, etc. But I actually don't see any impact. I started feeling like I should not be too Chinese, but in the end, actually, I feel there's general acceptance for Chinese technology. I think is maybe also our parentage, the size of an establishment of Ping An that helped. Not all countries accepted Chinese tech well, but then I think most countries, they have accepted investments from China, they felt the China growth, and they appreciated the Chinese tech. So I don't actually see a lot of impact. Of course, I don't take care of US business.
Right,
and we actually don't have any business in US, so I don't see much impact.
So you're lucky to be in that third region where you yourself are not operating in China, but you're not operating in the US either. So you've got Southeast Asia, which is fascinating. Karthik, I mean, American company, right? You are doing business around the world, including China. What's happening there? You're applying for various licenses in China, right? How's that going?
Yeah, so as a company that has a network that connects people and merchant establishments across 200 plus countries, we obviously believe in free trade, we believe in movement of people, and obviously trade wars kind of come in the middle of that, so that's one part. But having said that, it's been BAU for us. Nothing's really changed on the ground in terms of how we operate as a business. We have been working for a domestic license in China for many years, and that's no open secret. That's an open secret. And those discussions are going pretty well as well. So again, it's difficult to speculate when some of these things may change, but at this point of time, things seem to be going pretty fine.
That's interesting to hear, because everyone talks about trade wars being a big issue, but you both seem to be operating okay within that realm.